Doc Rivers recently spoke out about the criticisms he's received in the past for blowing 3-1 leads and how he felt that they weren't really justified or showed how great of a coach he believes that he is. I'm going to read out the quote. No one tells a real story, and I'm fine with that. It's unfair in some ways. I don't get enough credit for getting the 3 wins. I get credit for losing. I always say, what if we had lost to Houston 6? No one cares. One of the things that I'm proud of is we have never been swept. All the coaches have been swept in the playoffs. My teams achieve. A lot of them overachieve. And I'm very proud of that. I have to say, context is very important when Doc Rivers is saying how these other coaches have been swept before in NBA history. Sure, they've been coaches who've been swept, but some of these coaches who've been swept are guys who got to win multiple championships that I believe Doc Rivers would be happy to trade his resume of not getting swept to have more than one ring. I look at a guy like Pat Riley. He's been swept quite a few times, but he has 5 championships. The great Phil Jackson. He's been swept, I think, at least once in his career. That was by the Dallas Mavericks. He has the most titles in NBA history. Greg Popovich, he's gotten swept a few times, which I'd say really sucked as a Spurs fan, but he does have 5 titles. Again, yeah, those are humiliating moments for those coaches, but I don't think people really remember the sweeps those coaches endured. More so, they remember the championships over the times that those guys got swept. That's honest reality. If you ask people in the streets about those 3 legendary coaches I named and to bring up the times they got swept, I don't think many people could bring that up or would even know about it because the NBA has so many dumb casual fans. It would take some hardcore fans to bring up the moments when those guys got swept, if we're being honest. Now with Doc Rivers, everybody remembers his humiliating moments of blowing 3-1 leads. And I feel he's trying to deflect by saying that he's proud of how he got them to 3 wins first before losing. That's humiliating. That shows that your team wasn't mentally strong enough to get the job done and you weren't good enough to get them there, that you failed as a coach in being able to get them to complete the mission. I'm just going to go over these series in which he blew a 3-1 lead, and you're going to see an interesting theme on why they lost these series, I would say. So let's go back to the first 3-1 lead that Doc Rivers blew as a coach. This is back in spring of 2003 in the playoffs, first round. Orlando Magic versus the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons were the number 1 seed that year. They were a very good team. This was the year before they got Rasheed Wallace. They were obviously one piece away from being a championship team, but they're a very good team. The Orlando Magic go up 3-1 in that series, and everyone believes that the Pistons are going to choke, that they're not good enough. They don't have a legit star. Ben Wallace is a great defensive player, but there's no legit star on the Pistons, and Orlando with the young Tracy McGrady is just going to just end their season. It's just a matter of time. Not when, not if, as they say, but when is Orlando going to eliminate them. And then something interesting happens. In Game 5 of that series, the Detroit Pistons blow out the Orlando Magic by 31 points, 98-67. So what caused this to happen? Well, the most important thing to note in that game was Tayshaun Prince actually played 32 minutes. And prior to that game, he didn't play at all in that series from what I recall. This was the first game in which he got significant minutes in that series, and it changed the tide of that series. Tracy McGrady struggled. He shot 8 of 20 from the field, had 19 points. He was pretty much cooked in that game defensively. And that set the tone for that series. That Doc was never able to make that adjustment once Tayshaun Prince started playing in that series. He could never really recover from it. When you look at the when you look at the box scores, just there was no adjustment or anything to that counter of Tayshaun Prince playing significant minutes. Heck, in Game 7 of that series, Tayshaun had 20 points on 7 of 10 shooting. That's really what won that series for the Pistons. Was they started playing Prince. Coach Carlisle at the time decided to get desperate and play him, and Doc didn't counter that adjustment. He failed miserably to counter that adjustment, and that's a coaching mistake on his part that he couldn't counter it. The playoffs are about adjustments. It's about countering your opponent's move and forcing them to adjust to you, and Doc failed miserably in that series. Let's fast forward to 2015. The next series, Doc Rivers would blow a 3-1 lead, and this was when he was coach of the LA Clippers. This was the second round of playoffs. The Clippers were a 3 seed. The Rockets were a 2 seed. This series is interesting because 3 out of 4 of the first games, the Clippers just killed the Rockets. They won Game 1 by 16 points. They lost Game 2 only by 6. Then Game 3, they blow them out by 25 points. Game 4, they blow out the Rockets by 33 points. This series looks like it's done and that the Rockets are finished. They're going to go home for the summertime, and that's it. It's pretty much it. So what happens in Game 5 of this series that just changes the tide? Well, at the time, Kevin McHale, who was the coach of the Rockets, decides to play Josh Smith as a starter. He puts him in the starting lineup, and it pays off huge dividends for the Rockets. They end up winning that game by 21 points. And every game afterwards, they would win by double digits. Just by inserting Josh Smith in the starting lineup, that changed the complexion of that series. And Doc Rivers just failed to adjust. He failed to counter that move. That, to me, is just a huge coaching flaw. Just failure to adjust right there. Let's fast forward to 5 years ago in the bubble. Doc Rivers Clippers looked like they're a team that could win it all. Kawhi had that MVP finals run the year prior, and it looked like he was going to do it again, that he would be able to win another ring. Things looked good for the Clippers. I believe they're a number 2 seed that year, and they went up 3-1 against the Nuggets in that series. This was the Nuggets before Jokic was a proven MVP player, before Jamal Murray was a proven all-star caliber player. Granted, he's never made it to an all-star game, but all-star caliber player. This was before all that happened. This was kind of like their coming out party, I felt, this series. And what was interesting in this series was that the Nuggets were down and out in that Game 5, in that elimination game. And it looked like things were going to go down south for them. I think this happened in the third quarter. I'll never forget it. That the Nuggets might have been down by several points. And at the time, the Clippers, Marcus Morris stupidly confronts Paul Millsap. He gets up in his face. Millsap doesn't back down. He stands up to him. And suddenly Millsap gets angry and just goes on a run, just like having a turn back the clock game to when he was an all-star player. The Nuggets take heat and they just go on and run. It just revitalizes them. It gives them the energy. They take control of the game. They win that game, and they never look back. It's like they used that confrontation as fuel to get them back in the series. I do blame Doc Rivers for that. He has a pulse of his team. He should have been able to control Marcus Morris from doing something stupid like that. That goes on coaching, where you got to let your players know, like, hey, man, you can't be a dumbass like this. Let's not wake up a sleeping giant. They're on the verge of giving up. Their body language, you could tell they looked depressed. And then Marcus Morris gave them a reason to fight back. And I felt Doc could not adjust after that. He just fell apart. His team crumbled mentally, and he did crumble mentally too in that series afterwards. Doc is making excuses for his failures, and if you're a Bucks fan, that should bother you because this guy, instead of being honest with himself, looking inwards, is trying to cover up his flaws instead of acknowledging his weaknesses. Because how can you get better in life? I would say in general, if you're not honest about your weaknesses, if you're not objective about them, if you're not straightforward, even though it hurts, where you can acknowledge like, hey, I'm not good at this, or I screwed up at this. How are you going to get better? You won't. You'll continue to make the same mistake again and again and again. And I'm sure Doc will have the same screw up come playoff time this year, just whether it's the first round or the rounds after. This guy cannot admit when he's wrong or when he's made major mistakes. And I think his ego really will be his undoing in this year's playoffs. Obviously, the Bucks are their favorites to do anything, but if they're ever in a situation where they're up in a series, Doc can definitely cost them with not being able to acknowledge just his weaknesses and not being able to counter. I feel that's the not the biggest mistake, but the biggest weakness Doc Rivers has. He's not good at making counter adjustments when teams adjust to him. So I just wanted to throw that out there.